Hello, my name is Candace, and welcome back to Casual Bites, a podcast where we take small bites out of big thoughts. Casual Bites is streaming on Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music with full video episodes available on Spotify and YouTube. How are we doing today? It is, for me, a slow day. I woke up today really late, around like 3 p.m., which I usually get up a lot earlier than that, but since I woke up so late, I feel like a lot of my time has been wasted away just doing nothing, except for just prepping for this episode and this podcast, which is not like the worst thing in the world, but I just thought that I was going to have more to do with my day. I feel like I had a pretty long list of chores that I wanted to do, but I will just push that to tomorrow. But anyways, in this episode, I kind of wanted to talk about favorites in the terms of like the psychology behind favorites, why we have favorite things, and what it means for us, and just some of my favorite things, as well as, I don't know, like a little dissection of it, because I love getting behind the psychology of how we are. And I don't know, like I was just thinking about some of my favorite things recently, and I was like, I wonder why, like, we pick and choose our favorite things. Anyways, starting off with the psychology behind favorites, a very strong driver, if not the strongest driver, is our emotional association with an item or a thing. And this is because our brains connect our experiences with emotions, which I'm sure a lot of people kind of already know. But just to give an example, your favorite song can remind you of the specific time you're listening to it, and maybe during that time you were having a really happy memory, or you're surrounded by people that you love, and like that's why it's like one of like your favorite songs. And I think that is such a simple kind of psychology behind our favorite things, and it's such like a straightforward thing that, really easily you can tell people, oh, like this blah 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 is my favorite thing because it reminded me of this, and during that time I was having a great time with my friends and all that good stuff. So that's definitely the strongest and I think most powerful driver of something being your favorite thing. Another reason why is just familiarity, and this is actually like a psychology thing. This is called like the mere exposure effect, where studies have found that we tend to prefer things simply just because we've been exposed to it repeatedly, and because of that, our brain often interprets familiarity as safety. So, an example could be like if you're with your friends and they play this song a lot of times and you didn't really get the vibe at first, but then because they play it so much and they rave about it so much, it becomes something that you like too. And expanding a little bit more on this effect, I feel like things don't have to become your favorite thing for this effect to be true. And I think we see it a lot on social media with the trends, because there are so many different sounds on TikTok and different trends on TikTok. And we see it so often now because low-key no one really has originality, but also that's just the purpose of trends. Like you're supposed to see people doing it like a lot, and like that's how it actually becomes a trend, right? But then like another aspect of it is just when you hear a song that's associated with the trend out in public and you're like, oh, this is the trend that I associate with, that's honestly just due to that exposure effect, right? And I think you see this a lot happening too with songs or different sounds on social media, and you see like a newer generation now being like, oh my god, like this reminds me of blah 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 on TikTok. And older generations might be like, are you serious? Like I grew up like living off of this song, and like it was such like a big song for me back in college. And it's just kind of interesting to see like the different ways that people interpret different songs or different scenarios based off of, social media and this type of exposure that they got during the time. So, yeah, I feel like that's something that's really interesting to me. identity and self concept and the way we understand who we are is another reason why we have favorites. A lot of times, your favorite things kind of become who you are and how you define yourself, which I feel like is also very straightforward. But for me personally, I don't always really think about that. And I think it's funny because when like BuzzFeed was still like really popping, when it was in its like peak or whatever, like how they would have those like personality quizzes based off of your favorite animal. That's kind of what like this reminds me of, because it would just be so interesting to see the different outcomes that people would get when they chose like their favorite animal. You know how like dog, it's like, oh, if your favorite animal is a dog, you're outgoing and like you're like a puppy. It's like golden retriever vibes. And if your favorite animal's a cat, like you're more quiet or like shy or some bullshit like that. But genuinely, like, I think it's true that your favorite things associate with your identity, especially since your favorites can communicate your personality, your values. It says a lot about your social groups and your lifestyles. And sometimes when I think about this concept, I kind of think about my friends and my experiences and who I hang out with. And with just using a very simple example of music genres or songs that people might consider their favorites, I feel like I have specific people that pop into my head because that's just how I associate those songs. And I think sometimes it can cause stereotypes, like your own stereotypes, like in your head, how you perceive people. So, yeah, that's just another thing that I kind of think about when hearing about people's favorite things and, just seeing if I will vibe with them or not. But usually it's just a very surface level kind of like judgment, usually used when like I'm meeting someone new. Moving on to our next concept with favorites is the reward and dopamine that we get. And I think that this particular concept kind of relates a little bit more to things that we do or things that we consume, whether it's like physically consuming, like you're eating, or if it's like just like visually consuming, like you're watching something or you're looking at something. And with, anything with dopamine, when you're doing something that constantly gives you pleasure, our brain begins to anticipate that pleasure. And over time, like the more that you do whatever it is that you're doing, the item or thing becomes your favorite because your brain just expects it to be rewarding. And a lot of times this can be true with the media that you consume. So, favorite movies, favorite shows, or it can be like favorite foods, like what you order. And I think a lot of times um, people order the same things and they have like their regular, or they have, something that they like and they're always getting it, is because of this reward and dopamine. I think oftentimes if you're asking someone, like, why is this your favorite food? Or why is this your favorite show? Sometimes people can be like, oh, it's because I love the plot and I like the actors in this show and like blah, blah, blah. But I feel like a lot of times it's more so just how it's making you feel when you're watching it. And obviously, this relates back to like the first concept of, like your emotions and how you associate with things emotionally. But if you are watching like a comfort show and you're watching it again and again and again, I feel like that has more to relate with like the dopamine concept than like the emotional concept. Adding on to that and comfort shows specifically, I just don't really see how it is like as much of an emotion thing, because a lot of people watch comfort shows when they're sad and they have a comfort show because it makes them happy, right? They're not, associating like a specific memory with it, if that makes sense. But they're more so doing it because they know that watching that show is going to make them happier and it's going to uplift their moods, which is probably a big reason of why it relates to it being their favorite show or favorite comfort show. That's just how I think about it. Anyways, those are like, I think, the four strongest reasonings behind why we have favorites, and how, if you really think about it, like each of your favorite things could potentially fit into any of those four categories. They obviously overlap, like I said, with the comfort movies and like comfort shows and all that stuff. But I think it's really interesting to kind of think about, your reasonings behind it, like why you have favorite items or favorite topics and stuff like that. Moving on to my favorites. Not to make everything about me, but I just would like to share some of my thoughts behind why I have these favorite things. Because, it's always interesting to kind of dissect your brain a little bit and to kind of reflect on, just the way that you think. Starting off strong, I love food, but my favorite food is steak tartare. And for me, I think this is more of like a dopamine thing. And what I think about when I eat steak tartare, um, I mean, I first really liked it because when the first time I was eating it, like it was something really new to me, and I love raw foods like sashimi and sushi and all that stuff. But I think steak tartare was one of the more, not to say exotic, but just like different things, because I never ate raw beef, right? It was always like fish or like things that came from the sea, like squid or like octopus or stuff like that. But steak tartare was so different, and I love steak, right? So I was just like, wow, like this is so new, and like the experience was so good, especially because a lot of times when you eat steak tartare, it comes unmixed, right? So you have your capers, your egg yolk, your raw beef, obviously, like your onions and like all like the seasonings and all that stuff, and you get to mix it yourself. Oh. So just being able to experience that and just being able to see what you were eating exactly was really, really, really cool to me. So I think I initially started liking it because of, this emotion or like this memory or like just the concept of it. But as like the time went by, it started becoming my favorite food because of the dopamine that I would get. A lot of times when I was sad, like I would go to this cafe out in DC, and I mean, it still has my favorite, like most affordable steak tartare. So whenever I was sad, I would always go and I'd order that, and I just feel so much better. And I would study there a lot with my friends, so it was I always ordered it. Like I never ordered anything else from that cafe food wise. And I think it just was like it's a whole experience for me, and it really gave me happiness. And like with the dopamine concept, right? It just gave me so much joy, like eating it and like having the textures of like the raw meat that was like really cold, and it just like paired really well with like a warm freshly toasted like piece of bread. Oh, it was just so good. So I mean, like to this day, like I still say it's my favorite food, like it's my death row meal, so to say. But yeah, I found that really interesting when I was kind of just like researching about psychology, because I was just like, I always knew I liked it because it tasted good. And I think so many people think that, like food wise or music wise, that these things are your favorites because it tastes good or it sounds good. But that just means that you like it, right? Like there's no way that something would become your favorite thing if you didn't like it first. Next favorite is music festival slash like concert. And in my notes app, I have a ranking of all of my favorite shows that I've gone to. And so I was looking back at that when I was making this episode. And at the top is when I went to go see Subtronics earlier this year. Um, Funny thing, I actually went to go see it on my mom's birthday. So, like, it's like something that I will always remember. But I think this specifically became my favorite like concert was because of the memories that I had behind it, and like the feeling that I had and the emotions that I had being there. Let me just set the scene. First of all, it was already during like a great time period of my life. You know, the new year just happened, my last semester of college, and so I was already really happy and like vibes were already good. But I think a big factor of it was that it was the first time like my best friend and I went to a concert together, which is crazy. We had like a bunch planned before, but we just got busy and like it never really happened. So I think going to this concert with her was just like a really big highlight in and of itself. But secondhand to that, I think, I had honestly just pre-gamed really well. And just like listening to music when like you're intoxicated is always so nice, especially because it's fucking Subtronics, like he's insane. Which, speaking of Subtronics, there was a study done by a healthcare technology company called Tebra, and they had named Subtronics the top stress relieving electronic artist in America, which is really impressive. And I'm not surprised. Like, he is so talented in like mixing and like creating all these like different drops and different vibes. I feel like even if you don't really listen to dubstep or like that kind of music, like you can still enjoy some of his songs. And he's so OG, like he's been in the game for so long. Um but yeah, that's just like a side note that I remember seeing, so I was just doing some research on that. But going back to the actual concert itself, like it was amazing. Like I loved it. But I also just saw a bunch of people there that I wasn't expecting to see, and they're just all my friends, and I was like, wow, this just adds to the experience so much more. But then I was kind of researching into more about dubstep and like, reasons why people actually go and like why it is a lot of people's favorite genre. And it's honestly because of the heavy bass, and it is actually like a type of therapy, and it's called vibroacoustic. Vibroacoustic. Yeah, so vibroacoustic therapy is a wellness treatment that uses low frequency sound waves to promote relaxation. It reduces stress and eases muscle tension. So, actually, if you go to a rave, it's beneficial to you. But yeah, genuinely, I think every single type of rave esque music concert that I've gone to, like, it's always made me feel really good. And I think heavy bass is a big reason for that. Because, like, it really just heals your soul. You know what I'm saying? Even on top of that, the anticipation of just wanting to see Subtronics was just so good. Like, it just, like, exceeded expectations. Our friend was also opening for him, so like that was so fun. I was there when doors opened until like they closed. Just a good experience overall. So yeah, like that's the reason behind my favorite music concert. And I guess one last thing that I was thinking of when kind of making this episode was favorite stuffed animal. And I don't know. I think when you're like put on the spot and like you're told to kind of list out three of your favorite things, like it's really hard on the spot. Like some people obviously have like their go-to songs and like their go-to shows. Like, and I feel like that is such an easy and reliable topic. So thinking about like another favorite thing, I was just like, yeah, like it's my stuffed animal, like a medium-sized FAO Schwartz dog that I named Lucas. And like he's a pretty decent size, like very huggable, very cuddleable. And he's been with me since I think middle school. And fun fact, he actually replaced another one of my FAO Schwartz dogs. And originally, when going to New York, like I had the mission of getting a new dog because my old one I had since I was a baby was getting like really old and like tattered, and its nose was falling off. So I was like, this is traumatic and really scary. So I am going to get a new one. And I really wanted to get the same exact one that I had from before, but I think they probably like rebranded or something. So they weren't selling that specific dog anymore. So I got another one. It took me a really long time to get adjusted to it though, because I was like, not used to it. But I mean, he's my baby now. He has gotten me through so many hard times, especially in high school when I was like really emo. And he's gotten me through a bunch of fights that I've had with my parents, applying to colleges, doing SAT stuff, like actually going to college, and like breakups and just like all that stuff. But also, I feel like this is such like an emotional support item for me. It has a lot to do with the exposure and like the familiarity. Like I have a sense of safetyness when I'm with it. But I think it also has to do with the emotions and my memories with it, just because even though they were sad memories, I knew it was something that would kind of like hold me together and just like keep me really grounded. So, yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting to kind of dissect all these things and to really see why these things are my favorite things. And like I said, I think it's always fun because you get to kind of learn a little bit more about yourself. I know a lot of people have favorite foods too because it's something that their grandma used to make all the time for them, or it's something that their mom used to make every day for breakfast, or if it was like a specific dish for like a family meal. And I don't know, it's just really interesting because you can honestly apply it to anything in your life. It doesn't even have to be like a favorite thing, it can just be any type of situation or scenario. And I think it's a really healthy way of kind of just learning more about yourself, especially like if you're just kind of starting to kind of dissect your life and you kind of want to explore yourself more, which obviously leads to a lot of emotional intelligence, in my opinion. And I think the more emotionally intelligent you are, the better of a person you are. But yeah, just to summarize, a lot of times our favorite things can tell us a lot more about who we are than we think. And, maybe after listening, you should look around and think about why some of your favorite things or items are your favorite and get to know yourself a little bit better. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. Again, if you like this episode, make sure to follow and rate Casual Bites wherever you're listening: Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Amazon Music, and send it to someone who might need to hear it. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at Casual Bites. Thanks for taking small bites out of big thoughts with me. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.